4.1 Introduction to the Cartesian Plane. So in this lesson, I'm going to show you what this Cartesian plane is. It's a way for us that we can plot points and coordinates. And the Cartesian plane itself came from a famous mathematician named René Descartes in the 17th century. And we also sometimes call it the XY plane. And what it is, well, it's a grid. And on this grid, it consists of two lines that are perpendicular to each other. So I'm going to draw two lines here. So one line will be like this, going straight up and down. And the other line will be going left to right, just like this. And you notice these two lines are perpendicular to each other. That is, they are at right angles to each other. Okay. And where these two lines meet, we call this point the origin. Okay, so we on my diagram here, the origin would be right here in the center. So I'm just going to quickly label this origin. Okay, the coordinates of this point, this origin point, we define this as a coordinate system, and this coordinate system is giving this point point 0, 0. Okay. The horizontal number line is called the x-axis or the horizontal axis. So I can label this x to represent the x-axis. And my notes here, if we don't call it the x-axis, we always call it the horizontal axis. And similarly, we can look at the other one, and we call that one the vertical axis. Okay, so you know the numbers that are on this vertical line here. This is the vertical number line, and we also call this line the y-axis or the vertical axis. So I'm going to put in a y to show that this is the y-axis, and I'm going to write here for our note on the vertical number line. Is called the y-axis or the vertical axis. Okay, so a Cartesian plane is made up of 4 sections. You might notice we have some sections here, looking at the 4 different squares or blocks that are made from the division of these axes. So it's 4 sections, and each section has a special name. It's called a quadrant. Each section is quadrants. And quadrants are numbered using Roman numerals. So we'll either number them 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the quadrants themselves, if I label them on my diagram, this would be quadrant 1. And going counterclockwise, here I would have quadrant number 2. And down here I would have quadrant number 3. And to the bottom right, I'd have quadrant number 4. Okay, so the first quadrant occurs where all the values are positive. So positive x values, positive y values. The second quadrant occurs where you have negative x values and positive y values. And the third quadrant occurs when we have both negative x and negative y values. The fourth quadrant occurs when we have positive x and negative y values. Okay. Just to make it clear, when I define the coordinate system is always defined as the x and value first and then the y value. So these ordered pairs, coordinates, ordered pairs, is what we call them. So the first number is the x coordinate, and this tells us how far left or right you must go from the center, from the origin. And the second number is the y coordinate, and it tells us how far up or down we must go. Okay, so when we look at the ordered pair 2, negative 4, the first bracket represents the x coordinate. The first number, I should say, the first number in the bracket there. So that 2 is my x coordinate. And the second number represents the y coordinate. So the negative 4 is the y coordinate. So you start at the origin, you move 2 units to the right, and then 4 units down. If it's negative, you're going to go down. So if it's positive, you're going to the right. And if it's negative for the x, you go left. For the y values, if it's positive, you go up. If it's negative, you go down. So 4 units down. Okay, so let's go down to this example. So plot and label the following points. So we have point A, point B, and point C. Okay, so I'm going to plot this in a nice little table here of x values and y values. So reading point A, the x value is 2, the y value is -1. Point B, if I read point B here, I have -1 for my x value. Look at the y value, -2 is my y value. Same for point C, I have -1 for my x, and I have +1 for my y value. Okay, so we're going to plot this. So this is just putting this in my table. I want to plot this in the graph. And to do that, I have to create my axes. So again, so I'm going to take my straight lines. I'm going to draw a y-axis here, and I need to do that one more time and draw an x-axis. So let's just try and space it out nicely here. So here's my x-axis. Oops, not lined up nicely. I'm going to move that a little bit. I have to redraw it. Let's try that again. A little bit, it's not straight, quite straight. Okay, well, maybe I'll try making it a little bit thicker. Okay, close enough. So, I mean, you try your best with the pencil. The pencil and ruler should probably be much easier to do than what I'm trying to do here on the screen. So now I'm going to plot these points. So first, you have to know you have to draw a scale. You have to create a grid and a label scale. So create a grid and label your scale. Okay, because you can't just assume one square in this grid represents 1. You have to show it. Okay, sometimes you can skip count and count each grid could represent 2, and count by 2s, 2, 4, 6, 8. But here it's just enough for us to count each grid square as 1 unit. So it's good to make sure you label that. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Going up is 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we're going to go down. Negative values, -1, -2, -3, -4. I'm going to go to my left with negative values, -1, -2, -3, and -4. So when I plot these points, so A tells us this is point A, here I have point B, and this is point C. So A is 2 and -1. So I go to x-axis here, my x-axis is here, my y-axis is over here. My x-axis, I go along 2 to the right, so 1, 2. I go 1 to the 1 down on the y in the y direction, the down direction. So 1, 1, -1 is over here. So this point is my first point. That's point A. Look at point B. It tells us to go 1 to the left, and for the y value, it tells us to go 2 down. So from the origin, I go 1 to the left, and I go 2 down, 1, 2. Okay, and there's my point B. For point C, for the x value, it tells us to go to 1 left, 1 to the left, and for the y value, it tells us to go 1 up. So starting from the origin, go 1 to the left, and then go 1 up. And there's my point C. And that's how you plot your coordinate values. Let's look at another example. So for the following set of values, find the next 3 values of x and their corresponding y values, and plot and label each point on the xy grid. Okay, so let's start plotting some values here. So we have 3 and 1, 1 and 5, -1 and -3, -2 and -4, 2 and 5, 0 and 2. Actually, we can do this even better. Why don't you put them in order of x? So let's start with the lowest negative value, so -2. So -2 and -4. The next lowest x value is -1, so -1 and -3. Then we have 0 and 2. And then we have 1 and 5. And then we have 2 and 5. And then we have 3 and 1. So I'm going to plot these on my graph. So here's my, I have to draw my axes here. So here's my y-axis. And I'm going to draw my x-axis as well. For some reason, it's not letting me draw a nice straight line. It's snapping up and down. So I might have to try that again. I drew this straight. Something like that. Uh-huh. Automatic axis. Why didn't I use this in the beginning? There you go. Much better. Okay. Maybe I can move that down one. There. Okay, so here's x. Here's my y-axis. I'm going to create my scale. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And down here, -1, -2, -3, and so on. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And down here, -1, -2, oops. -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. The one over there. Okay, so we're going to plot some points, -2 and -4. So left 2, down 4. There's my first point. Now the next point, left 1, down 3. So left 1, down 3 brings us right there. Then we have 0 and 2. So 0 and 2 is up there. And then we have 1 and 5. 2 and 5. 3 and 1. So what you're going to be doing in class is we're playing a little battleship game. We're going to put some letters on the grid paper and use coordinates to determine if you can sink your partner's battleship. Okay, and I'll go over the rules of how to play this game in class.